So welcome everyone to the Town of Richmond Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, December 4th, 2024. It looks like we have a quorum of members and we would like to welcome our newest member, Rebecca Connell. Thank you for joining. Just recently appointed, fresh off the Select Board's agenda. So great. We're so happy that you could join.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Okay, and we also have members Mark Fausel, Ian Bender, Chris Granda, and myself. So we do have a quorum of members. Our planning director, Keith Oborn. We have a couple of guests, it looks like. So we'll get started. And we're going to start tonight by looking at our agenda and making any adjustments that people would like to make to
Virginia?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I was wondering if Rebecca wouldn't mind just introducing herself a little and just saying a couple words about what brings you to the Planning Commission.
Yeah.
Sure. You good with that, Rebecca?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Rebecca Connell. I moved to Richmond in June. My husband and I have spent the past 2 years building a blue house at Faye's Corner. And you can't miss us because we're blue and we've got a lot of solar panels in our front lawn. I married a Vermonter, which is ultimately why I'm here. But even though my husband brought me kind of kicking and screaming from Boston because I've never lived in anything over 1,600 square feet, I am pleasantly surprised by how much I am enjoying living in Vermont, not just being a visitor. And so I think my interest is twofold, right? Like I wanna get to know my community. I want to get to know the issues. I want to get to understand how the town is run, and this is really, my first dipping my toe in the water, so to speak. And I'm very mission oriented and very service oriented. I was with the U.S. government for a decade and a half before joining private industry, and I do a lot of other civic volunteering. And so it really feeds my soul to know that I am contributing to something greater than corporate profit. So that's why I make sure I get involved not only in my volunteerism in my other capacities, but while I am trying to get more involved in Richmond governance.
Well, thank you and welcome. It's wonderful to have you on board.
Yeah.
Okay, and over time, I guess you'll get to know the rest of us. Chris, do you want to have the rest of us introduce ourselves, or?
Well, I know we have an agenda.
Yeah.
Maybe really quickly.
Yeah, sure.
After you.
So I'm Virginia Clark, and I live on Hillview Road, a former veterinarian, now deeply involved in planning. I've been on the Planning Commission before, the Select Board, so involved in the town for 40 years. And yeah, this is kind of back to my roots, my interests in planning and how we can all get along together by having shared rules. So that's my story. Chris, you're up.
Sure. Well, your intro sounded very familiar to me, Rebecca, because except for the color of your house, I could have almost said the same thing about me. Lots of solar panels, a public sector, private sector, mission oriented, involved with the town. Like Virginia, I'm a former select board member, been on the planning commission, and the energy committee is not a official town committee, but it has been fairly active in the past, and Virginia is on that as well. Yeah, and I've been here about 20 years.
And where in Richmond do you live?
On West White Hill, so the other end of town.
Okay.
Okay, Mark.
You're muted, bud.
Let's try that again.
Sounds good.
Mark Fossil. I live on Hillview Road, across from the berry farm. I don't know if you've been berry picking this year yet. Oh, great. So That's my neighborhood. I've been on the commission for a bit now. And I work in environmental testing laboratory, and kids have gone through the school system. Very good system, good choices you've made. Yeah, they're up and adults and living in the world.
Wonderful.
And by a bit, Mark, you mean like what?
09, so 15 years.
15 years. Yep.
Okay.
So seniority there. All right. And let's go to Ian.
Hi, Ian Bender. I've been on the planning commission for a bit also, but more like a year almost. So I'm just still learning the ins and outs of what this commission does, and but I'm really enjoying being able to participate and have a little bit of input, even though it's usually uninformed. And I have a propane tank, and I'm thinking about a solar panel maybe at some point.
I would beg to differ about uninformed, Ian.
Really?
Well,
You have a good
that's
straightforward
a nice
approach.
compliment. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think that's about it. But welcome to the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
And where do you live, Ian?
I live on Dugway Road, over kind of close to where Chris is in Jonesville.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. And it looks like, is that Allison? Are you on this? Are you on by phone, Allison?
631 area code.
Okay.
I gotta believe Allison has an 802 area code.
Yeah, 631's Long Island, I think.
Okay. So it's, and whoever is on the phone, it would be great if you could identify yourself so that we can have as a guest listed in the minutes you by your name rather than by your phone number. But that's up to you. Okay, so that's us. We have Allison Anand, who is not on at the moment. She may get on this call at some point. She has a little difficulty connecting with her computer sometime, but yep, and that's the group. There's one vacancy that remains, so there are 6 of us with 1 vacancy. So if you know anybody else, they should be invited to join also.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so let's look at the agenda. Basically, there are 2 items on the agenda. One is to discuss the amendments to the Jolina Court zoning district. And we're going to talk about that. We have a draft that we can work from. And the other item is to discuss the density bonus program, which we have a draft also that we're working off. So we're considering these 2 separate items. They have a relationship with each other, but they are actually, the density bonus is going to be a freestanding section of the Richmond zoning regulations. The Jolina zoning district is also its own section. And that will include the changes that we have to make to the PUD section to do what we want to do with that. So those are the 2 items. Does anyone have any changes or additions? Anything else they would like to talk about?
Hey there, this is the 631 number. Apologies, I didn't want to cut you off. I think I was auto muted when I joined, and I just figured out how to unmute myself via phone.
And what is your name?
My name is Matt. Last name is Mears. I am new to town, just joining to listen in.
Okay, great. How do you spell your last name?
Mears.
It's like it sounds.
All right.
Welcome, Matt.
Mars. Great. Well, good to have you as a guest. Yep. Feel free to chime in. We won't be able to see your hand raised, but speak up if you have something to add.
Hey, Virginia.
Thank you so much.
Sorry. Quick question. Any more info on the follow-up with Jana Brown?
Nope, there's no more information on that. We have not heard back from her.
Okay.
So, and I'm planning to contact her again to see if she will have something by the time that the VRNs, the Village Residential Neighborhood Districts, come before the Select Board for their public hearing, which is on the 6th of January. So I'll certainly let you all know and forward anything that she sends along, or if we can set up a meeting, that would be great. You know, it's the holiday season. They're getting ready to start the session. I don't know exactly when she's going to have this information. Okay. All right, so not seeing any changes or adjustments, we'll proceed with the agenda as posted. Any public comment on non-agenda items, which I assume that was from Chris. We'll call that a non-agenda item. Any other comments from our guests? Okay, not seeing any hands or hearing any comments. We'll move on. We're going to look at the minutes of the meeting of November 20th, 24. Anybody have any additions, corrections, anything they would like to add to those meeting minutes? Okay, not seeing any hands or hearing any comments. We will accept those minutes into the record as written. Okay, so we're going to move on to our first actual agenda item to discuss the density bonus program. And this is where we left off at our last meeting, at the end of the meeting. So we have plenty of time this time to discuss it. And I think since you have all had a chance to look at this, I'm going to start by opening up the floor to comments, questions, thoughts that people have about this draft. So the goal is to get it to a point where we feel that we can approve it for a planning commission public hearing. So we're looking for feedback from the commissioners on what this document needs to get us to that point. So I'm opening up the floor and would like to hear what you all are thinking about this document.
Well, Mark's muted, so I'll lead off. But as I said last time, I think that from a perspective of the first two options for increased for density bonus, this feels fairly complete to me. Those being the accessible adaptive housing option and the true income sensitive affordable housing option. I'm sure there are details that people want to discuss and maybe refine, but in the general terms, last time around, I had only one comment on the accessible affordable one, which I noticed you made in the revised draft, Virginia, and so that seems good to me. And I feel the same way about true income sensitive affordable housing. As far as public parking goes, it seems like there are still some unresolved questions. What I don't see in the packet is written comments from Josh and from, was it Pete, was the other person? And so I'm assuming they chose not to provide us with those.
I think Keith got something today from them. So
Well,
he can.
we obviously haven't had a chance to look at it.
Right. Well, it's very short. People like to respond at the last minute, but I don't know. Do you want to read Pete's comment, Keith?
Yes. But I think the issue was that certain members wanted this in writing.
Yes.
All
So this is what he wrote to us.
right.
The
I
reason
can
for
pull
asking
this
for
up.
it in writing was just to be able to refer to it as opposed to have it be anecdotal. If this is something that he said to you and you wrote it down, that's
No.
good enough for me. It's just as
This-
long as Pete or Josh stands behind it.
He wrote it, and Josh also had a comment, so it's very brief. You can pull it up if you want, Keith, or if you,
Bear with. Everybody see this?
Yeah.
yep.
Okay.
We got a couple of things within the last hour for this meeting, so this is one of them.
Yeah, so you can see that this is Pete's response is that we can't guarantee that the town will keep the spaces plowed in the winter months due to the lack of control of parking because the property is not owned by the town. I feel we should be very careful about doing anything as we could be held liable for any repairs. I'm not personally overly concerned about that aspect of it, but I am a little bit concerned about the actual owners of those spaces providing that maintenance, and there would have to be some type of enforcement arm on that, which is expected. Josh, I think, sorry, delay, I say if the applicant is maintaining the spaces, this is from the town manager, I think it'll be okay that with that arrangement, perhaps add something about an annual inspection by the town of the spaces and an expectation that we be plowed within a specific time after a snowstorm, 3 hours or something along those lines. And so we need some type of enforcement, which is, to my point, is we're going to need some type of enforcement for that moving forward. And that needs to be promulgated. I don't think it's all that difficult, to be honest with you, just in order to move this forward. So those are the two in writing responses that I got today, one an hour and a half ago, or 2 hours ago or so.
Thanks, Keith.
Yep, you got it.
So I guess, does anyone have any thoughts about how this could be done? How the applicant could be held responsible? I mean, I think clearly we would have to have a written agreement with the highway department, maybe the town manager, and that is listed as one of the conditions under the parking bonus section, is that there is a written agreement about how this is all going to work out. Ian, you had a comment.
Just a question in general. So should we be thinking about this in terms of if this density bonus document as a whole is kind of what we're gonna have for others, or is it strictly for Jolina Court?
This is going to go as a freestanding section of the Richmond zoning regulations, so it will be available to whichever zoning district we put it into.
Okay.
So for right now, we're only suggesting, or we have only proposed, that it be in the Jolina Court district. But one of the things that we would like to do to try to have it not be spot zoning is to make it available to other districts. So we haven't gotten to that point yet because we've been doing these other things, but we would like it to be alleged that we're going to be able to put this into, for instance, the residential commercial district in the village.
Mm-hmm.
Why not? But those will have to be taken up separately, independently, or maybe in the AR district. Any of these places could have written in to their district specs that the density bonus section applies to them. But we'll have to take that, and make it more widely known that we're going to do that for the other districts, because that is how we've been proceeding. Right. Is that whenever we talk about a district, we only talk about that one district. Okay. So that's the plan. Anybody want to talk about that?
I just say that I think we've taken some care to design these provisions so that there's, as far as I know, there's nothing in them that would make them specific to Jolina Court. They could be applied to other districts. And speaking just personally, if we like them and the select board likes them, I don't know why we wouldn't do that.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, many of the other things, like making the changes that are required by the statutes, 47 and 181, we need to do that for the other districts. It's something that's on our extensive list of amendments that we need to be making to the whole zoning document. So,
Virginia, I just have a question on 6.15.6.5.
okay, yep,
We're talking about the qualifying affordable units may not equal or exceed 20% of the total project units.
yes,
So when we're talking, I think what you guys are saying is Jolene Court. What is that? That's saying that it cannot exceed, affordable housing cannot exceed 20% of that development.
correct.
Is there a reason why we said 20%?
Yes, there is a reason why we said 20%. And that is because in Act 147 and 181, there is a requirement that defines any affordable housing development that has 20% or more affordable units gets special bonuses. So that's already an option that Jolina Court or anybody else can take. And one of the things that we have to deal with is putting that in to the zoning. And what we are proposing to do is to put it in with the language from the statute as a separate section, section 6.16, which parrots the language of the statutes saying any affordable housing development where at least 20% of the units or a minimum of 5 units are affordable, then they automatically get a 40% density bonus, and they are allowed to go up 1 story above the maximum height. So
Okay.
what we're doing in this case for our density bonus program is trying to allow for projects that don't want to have 20%, like the Jolina Court development isn't interested in having 20% of their units be affordable. They might have 1 or 2 or 3, possibly. But so our program is for those people who don't want to have 20%. Because if they have 20% or more, they're already in the category of getting these other bonuses.
They already have increased density, is what you're saying.
They are allowed by statute to have 40% increased density
Okay.
and to go up 1 story above the height. We are not allowing that. So what we're saying here is, if you read the last sentence of 6.15.6.5, any project qualifying under section 6.16 will not be eligible for density bonus units under 6.15.
Okay.
You're either a little guy with under 20% affordable units, and you can apply to our program. If you have 20% or more of your units in your project, then you can't also get these density bonuses. You get the other density bonuses that are allowed by statute.
Okay. And I mean, I would assume I'm making a lot of assumptions here. So,
That's fine.
let me know, but I would assume that my take in Richmond is that housing is not affordable. And I mean, I read a stat recently where the average home in Vermont is $400,000 and only 16% of Vermont residents can afford that. So I guess my question on 6.15 is, we're just trying to give people the flexibility to have density units. We're not necessarily dictating that they have to have a certain number.
Correct.
Okay.
And that is called inclusionary zoning.
Mm-hmm.
actually require that a certain percentage of your units, either saleable or rentable, are affordable. So the bigger municipalities like Burlington, South Burlington, Winooski, Heinsberg, to a certain extent, they have figured out how to have people want to build in their town with the rules of inclusionary zoning that require you to have a certain number of affordable units.
Okay.
So developers aren't eager to build in Richmond anyway, and we're trying not to be too discouraging, but to
Okay.
kind of encourage good behavior. We don't think we're able to have an inclusionary zoning law at the moment. So
Okay. Okay, interesting. I'll
Yeah.
have to read up a little bit more on it.
yeah, affordable
okay.
housing, so it's expensive, you know.
Yeah.
Basically, you're taking a loss of revenue that has to be made up somewhere else. And in the places like Heinsberg, for instance, they look to the affordable housing developers to be the ones who bear the burden of that reduction of forecastable income.
Okay.
Here, the developer is the only one, you know, the town is not planning to subsidize these units. The developer has to subsidize the units. And whether it's possible to get financing in this current problematic financial landscape for a building where a portion of the income is taken away, you know, the banks really don't want to lend you money if they think you're not going to make enough money back to maintain the building. You know, the banks don't want the building. So,
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
so that's why we're trying to kind of ease it in with a compromise solution between requiring everybody to make affordable housing, which will not happen here. If people can't make enough money, if they can't borrow the money to make it because the bank thinks it's too much of a risk, then
Mm-hmm.
So,
that's the strategy. It's a compromise strategy. I don't know.
Okay.
so I think, Virginia, to be fair, I think you should characterize that as your opinion.
Yes, that is my opinion.
And others of us hold different opinions, but I agree with Virginia in that what you see on the paper here, Rebecca, is a compromise that's been reached through months of discussion in the committee. But certainly it's a choice of what the planning commission is choosing to put in front of the select board. The select board can accept it or not, or alter it you know, as they desire. But to not do full inclusionary zoning is the choice of the planning commission. It's not that we can't do it. We can do it if we wanted to.
What kind of feedback have we gotten from the community on this?
We haven't really gotten any.
Okay.
This
Have
is
we had any outreach?
On inclusionary zoning specifically,
Yeah.
not really outreach on that.
Okay.
so this will be what will happen, we hope, at the planning commission's public hearing. So we will put these documents in front of the public at the planning commission level to take people's input on this work that we've
Okay.
done. And, you know, as Chris said, this is a compromise between those of us on the planning commission who wished to make more housing as much as possible, and those who wished to have some constraints on it that would fulfill other goals. You know, the affordability of housing is one goal, but the availability of housing is another goal.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like a compromise between trying to, you know, we want to make sure that they build this building, for which they have a permit to have 31 units at least, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to make it too onerous that they can't get the money to build this building, which of course is my opinion that they might not be able to. That's been stated by the developer.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
Yeah. think the
That's
developer has stated that the main barrier so far has been interest rates, but that's my recollection.
Yes, well, the developer has not expressed enthusiasm so far for really any of this work. They would just like to be allowed to put more units. And their stated goal is that this fulfills the town's need for more housing, for available housing. We also just got a letter also within the last hour from Eric Thomas, who's been coming to these meetings, who, I'll put it in the packet for next time, but, basically he says we should get as much housing as we can. And
I'll agree that Buttermilk has not expressed much interest in anything other than what they've proposed. And, I'll say, as I've always said, that our job is not to simply give developers whatever they propose. So,
yeah, well, our job is to try to do what's best for the town. And
of course,
obviously more availability is one thing that would be good for the town. More affordability, that would be good for the town too. So we have some competing goals going on, which are hard to work with. So, all right. So hopefully that answers your question about 615.6.5. Any
Ian has his
other?
hand up.
Yeah,
Ian has his hand up.
I was just gonna make a comment
Yep.
directed to Rebecca about community outreach. I think that this commission represents a broad spectrum of viewpoints on this subject that fairly represents the community. I don't know, Chris, what do you think?
I think we do. We definitely have a range, but I think that what Rebecca's raising is sort of maybe something we want to talk about a little bit is in the public presentation, which is the next step. How do we want to talk about our deliberations and present to the public the different options that we considered in the commission? I mean, I think it's important, one, the public understand what it is we're proposing to bring to the select board, and two, how we got to that. Because they expect us to work together and compromise, right? That's what we're doing. But I think that the public will be, at least maybe I'm projecting, but as a member of the public also, I'd want to know,
Yep.
How do we get to this spot?
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
saying that we should stifle that part of the process in any way. I'm just, for Rebecca's sake, to kind of know that, like you said, we arrived at this document. We're
Yeah.
coming from a lot of different perspectives and
Sure.
kind of ended up here. So,
Yeah, no, again, I'm just, listening and trying to take it all in. I think, I think I come at it from while I trust all the due diligence has been done, I'm looking at my daughter's 7th grade class at Cmsn is 60 kids. I know that that's down significantly. Why is that? Probably my hunch. I don't have the data, but it's probably because there's not affordable housing. And I see other kind of demographic things going on in Vermont at large and Richmond at a micro level. And I just am curious, right? I'm curious about all of that more than anything. I honestly don't know how people afford to live in this town from what I see.
It's a huge problem. I mean, the police officers can't afford that serve on our police force can't afford to live in town. I think what we have observed, I've certainly observed over 20 years, is that Richmond is becoming an expensive suburb of Burlington. And, to some extent, there may be relatively little we can do about that. It's forces, it's literally statewide forces. And, that's draining population out of the smaller towns and villages and funneling them to the northeast corner of the state. But one of the reasons that I've fought so hard to build true affordability into our zoning, or at least to try to do that, is because I don't think we can depend on the market to do that. If we just build more housing, we'll have more expensive housing, and we'll just have the people that actually work in Richmond live elsewhere and have to drive here. And we are losing our town clerk for that reason right now.
I
So
know.
it's not an easy thing to address and figure out. And certainly we're not the only place that is confronting this problem. But I think if we don't grapple with it, that's where we'll end up.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's important to realize that the zoning barriers to housing may be a small part of our problem in Richmond. We have our terrain to grapple with, the floodplain, the hilly ground, the built-out nature of the village. We have the cost of construction, which is very high right now, the cost of materials, the cost of actually building these units exceeds the amount of revenue that can be expected from them. So, the state has tried to grapple with it by, for instance, putting that affordable housing development language in there that we were just talking about. But we're not single-handedly as a zoning authority going to be able to necessarily fix all those other parts of the problem. So, Ian, you have your hand up.
That was a mistake from not putting it down. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Very good. All right. So, the thing that we don't want to do is make it onerous on developers so that they don't build here. And the people on the housing committee, that we now have some development-oriented folks on the housing committee, will tell us that it's a hard place to build, Richmond, just because of the way the municipal infrastructure is, with the water and sewer lines are very limited. There's a problem with expanding the water and sewer district. It's hard to build affordable housing that is not on municipal water and sewer. So there are a lot of factors kind of that go into it. Okay, anybody else have any comments they want to make about any portions of this document?
I would like Mark to address parking, because we didn't talk about that last time, really. Well, we did a bit, but because you weren't here, Mark, we deferred on that, and it's the one that, at least in my mind, has the most questions remaining about actual implementation. So sorry to put you on the spot, but
Oh, no, that's fine. I read what it was. 2 for 1 seems generous. And it sounds like we're going to make it clear that the person providing the parking spots is responsible for the maintenance of those parking spots.
Yep, absolutely.
And right, so I mean that all sounds good. 2 for 1, it's a little tight. I mean, but at least it's something. At least we're heading in the right direction. If the select board gets wind of it and says, "Oh wait, that's ridiculous to do that low trade in, let's make it 5 for 1." Well, then I could go there. I get that perspective too, but I also, 2 is a good start. Haven't really heard much from the community about any of these density bonuses things. So, this is a starting point. Let's get out and get some community feedback on this, and we can hone those numbers if appropriate.
So, Mark, one thing that you could comment on is as this document is going to be a freestanding section in the RZR, and we're going to be putting it in other districts, presumably, how are we going to think about parking as a bonus? For instance, if somebody wants to do some clustered housing out in the AR district and they want the density bonus of parking, is that going to be useful? Maybe we're not going to need any parking out there. You know, it's kind of only in the village that it's really useful.
That's an interesting point, because I think it makes, right, it is only practical and beneficial in the village. So I originally, my thoughts were keeping it in the village districts, the commercial district that you mentioned, et cetera, those types of things where we could benefit from. But arguably, maybe we would be better served with identifying districts that need additional public parking, or zones. Even doesn't even have to be a district. It could just, 200 feet from the main block, 300 feet from the main block, the main a thoroughfare, Bridge Street. And if somebody wants to increase the density in the AR district, and they own a plot of land in the village that they will be or they lease it, whatever, but they have to provide it. And they have to service those parking spaces. So maybe we should attack it from where we want.
So what I have in here as a placeholder for any kind of thoughts like that is in 6.15.7.1, which says the spaces shall be in a location where parking is in demand based upon assessment of the Richmond Highway Department or the Select Board. So that's kind of like a placeholder for, or kicking the can down the road, if you like, for somebody to decide, is this a location where parking is needed? I don't know how the Select Board would feel about having to decide that, but maybe they would have a general feeling that it's only useful in the village lots.
That's even better, because what if somebody were to provide parking out by the Huntington Road or the Huntington River Cochrane Road area, where people recreate on open land? Maybe those parking spots would be good. And the guy could offer, I'll offer these 2 spots, and the Select Board makes a decision that says, yeah, those would benefit the town overall. That's a good trade.
Okay, so you would be okay with the language. Keith, if you scroll up to 6.15.7.1. So at the end of 6.15.7.1, that statement, the spaces shall be in a location where parking is in demand based upon the assessment of the Richmond Highway Department or the Select Board. Or in consultation with the Select Board, in consultation with the Highway Department, or something like that.
Yeah.
All right, so that works for you?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, any other comments? I think somebody had a hand up, but I'm not seeing these hands.
Adam does. Adam
Okay.
has his hand up.
Okay, Adam. Welcome back, Adam.
Hey, how are you? How's everyone?
Good, how are you?
Good. I was just going to make the point that Mark made at the end there, that I think that there's quite a few places in town that kind of don't fall within the village center, where we've struggled with parking, mostly on, Dugway Road and Cochrane Road. Towards the end, there's also the end of Johnny Brook. There's been a parking lot there that was at a commission for a while, created a need. So it seems like there's a lot of kind of spots around town where this could be pretty advantageous. And then this is the first I've heard of this, and it sounds like a great idea on my end. Haven't done any more research on it other than reading your documents and listening tonight. So with that said, seems like a great
So as
great
a member
approach.
of the Select Board, you would be okay with having to decide this question? Or having
I mean,
it
I would
punted
probably,
over to you.
when it comes to the deciding part, I mean, I think that obviously, I guess having it and with the select board, it would be fine, but as a member, I'd probably lean on the parking advisory committee or the highway department or some other committee, because as I found out, and everyone else probably already knows, the select board doesn't actually do a lot of the work. We just make decisions based on the work other people do. So, but yeah, I think ultimately that process seems reasonable. Definitely room for tweaking, I guess, if it doesn't work or if other people have different opinions, but it seems reasonable at first glance.
Okay, so we could say something like it would be decided by the select board in consultation with the parking advisory committee, the highway department.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what those
Anybody else
stakeholders or
involved?
experts or who that would look like, but it seems reasonable to, I mean, I would think it would seem reasonable to keep it open-ended depending on where in town. I think the parking advisory committee generally has been more focused in certain areas. So there might be areas of need that they don't have expertise in. And then the same with the highway department, vice versa. So, but it seems reasonable. Yeah.
Okay.
Just a point.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Keith.
That's okay, Adam. Just a point of clarification real quick is that the DRB is the ultimate approval authority here.
That makes sense.
If you're going to have that type of approach, that would be more like a consultation or a letter from them, or, you'd want the developer to get that front ended before they go to the development review board. That's all.
Makes sense. So would this be kind of similar to, I guess I would kind of view it as a similar process to a water and sewer allocation where it would be something that would be necessary before.
Yeah.
Is that kind of
That's a good analogy. Absolutely.
Okay, cool. That helps me understand it. I guess I had one quick question, Virginia, and then pardon my ignorance. I'm sure I can, if I had tuned in more, I would know the answer to this.
No,
but there's
you probably have lots of spare time, Adam. So
yeah, lots of
tons of it. Yeah. There's a lot of language that says that there'd be a density bonus up to the maximum density in that district, and in some situations that makes sense to me. I'm just trying to wrap my head around, mostly in the village districts closer to the village where density is really easy to max out, what that density bonus looks like kind of in practice. If you can already max out your maximum, 2 or 3 units or whatever on a whatever point something acre lot, what would that density bonus look like from, and that could be any density bonus, whether that's for the parking or for affordable housing, some form of affordable housing or whatever. What does that look like in practice?
Well, so what we have installed in this document so far is the fact that in any district where this is going to apply, we would have a maximum total density. So, for instance, if the Jolina Court zoning district has a base density of 15
Gotcha. So it would be a different
acre,
maximum density versus
then
the
we
standard
also,
density.
we add in the language that says the maximum total density, which is the base density plus the density bonus density, would be 20 units per acre.
Gotcha. Okay, that clears it all up. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Appreciate it.
For any district that we would think of putting this in, we will have to add that language about what.
Yeah, so those two numbers would have to be different for it to work, but
yeah, exactly.
Whatever amount they're different is up for
debate.
Cool. Okay, thank you. That clears it up a bunch.
And in fact, we have had a debate here. What do we want the maximum? How many of these units would we allow them to have? Would we like it to be the maximum is 20 units per acre? Would the maximum be 24 units per acre? And we've settled on the number of 20. So they could have an additional 5 units per acre, which are density bonus units.
Cool. That seems, on the face of it, those ratios all seem reasonable to me. I haven't read it, but yeah, that makes sense. Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming. You'll be seeing it sooner or later, so.
That's the goal, right?
Good to have a preview. That's the goal, exactly. Okay, any other comments that people want to talk about this document?
All right.
So the sources for this information that's in this draft, some of it is from work that Ravi Venkataraman did, our previous town administrator, town planning director. some of it is from looking at other towns' documents. There's nothing, I couldn't find anything anywhere about a parking space bonus, so
We're special.
we're special in that regard. And if we want to have it, we will have to have the town attorney obviously look at it. We got the written comments such as they were from Pete and Josh. What other information would you like to have to make this document something that you would approve for a planning commission public hearing, for bringing it to the people? Rebecca, understanding that at the public hearing, we take input and then we take the document and we work on it some more based on the input before we approve a draft that goes to the select board. So, at some point we will have to say, okay, nobody has any comments, additional thoughts, places to get information. We would like to approve this draft to bring it to a planning commission public hearing. Mark.
Ay, caramba. You had me thinking about, you said legal, and I'm like, okay, we're going to make these people responsible for 2 parking spots in perpetuity. Seems maybe perhaps a little excessive, and mostly just really difficult to regulate because somebody's going to sell their property and move out of town, and what are you going to do? I wonder if we should put a time limit on it. 10 years, 20 years, everybody's, we're all going to be on e-bikes and in another 10 years. So we may be able to get in a couple of bikes per spot and eliminate congestion. But so, yeah, I don't know what the committee thinks should be that time frame, but that may be a reasonable caveat.
Place to go. And, the developer has expressed an interest in buildings 3 and 4, which were in their original master plan, which they certainly won't be doing for 10 years, I would guess. And they have expressed an interest in holding on to their parking because of their future plans. Right now, these spots, they don't need them exactly, but it's valuable, that land upon which those parking spots sit, and they may need them for buildings 3 and 4. So, I would certainly be open to a time frame for that. Just to mention the 15-year number, 15 is in the statute that we're going to put in about the affordable housing development of 20% or more affordable units, that if you qualify for that, you automatically get the 40% density bonus. That has a 15-year minimum. So that's the legislature's attempt to have affordable housing, to get it going in the communities. Even they are reluctant to say it looks like in perpetuity. They have said, well, the towns can put in anything they want, and that is something that we have to talk about when we come to talk about that. Do we want it to say in perpetuity? And I think it's the same question with the parking spaces. Do we really want it in perpetuity? Do we want it 15? Anyway, the 15-year number was what they put in as the minimum amount of time that you could require these stipulations to be in effect. So anybody else want to have a weigh in on that? I mean, whatever we do to make it a little easier, just my opinion, is going to make it more likely that some of this stuff is going to happen. So
I think it's important to put a number on it for number one, to complete the document and get it out of committee. So I think that the committee, and this is my 2 cents, should potentially consider about a 15-year, only because it marries with the affordable housing aspect of it. It just seems to be a logical number. I would lean on you, Mark, on that, on what you're thinking. But I think the bottom line is to get this promulgated and, to the public hearing.
The other thing that I worry about a little bit is from the town's point of view, having something in perpetuity. We go through a lot of
Yeah.
committees, a lot of zoning people, a lot of, somebody's got to keep track of this. In perpetuity is a really long time for
Yeah.
it to actually be,
There were all supposed to be all sorts of accessible and public paths at the Church Street development at the end. Those within a couple of years, those all turned into private gardens. But there was supposed to be access from the park all the way up to Railroad Street with that development that looked good on paper at start, but it didn't have a monitoring program.
yeah. And
And
it's tough to get people to pay attention to it, I mean, we're all sort of stretched out with just keeping up with the day-to-day, let alone monitoring things forever.
if there's a sign that says public parking and it's covered with snow, we're gonna be like, oh, we need to get the contractor to clear that snow because we gave it to them, and after 15 years they can take down the sign and we won't need it.
So
Right.
there, yeah. So you need an overseer for the overseers. That's yeah.
Right, which is crazy. It gets too crazy, but so it'd be easy to do that with parking, because if there's a public parking sign on there and it's not accessible, somebody's going to say something. I know this town. Somebody's going to say something, and then that will be the driving force, rather than expecting the town planner or the zoning administrator to walk paths on the back of Church Street to make sure they stay accessible. That's an unreasonable expectation.
Or to go over site plans that were approved by the DRB 5 years ago and see if everything's up to snuff on that. Yeah, I mean, that's what compliance does, but we really don't have a compliance arm with the town.
Right.
So, I mean, we do with the zoning administrator, but that's just relegated to whatever the DRB says. And then we react to inputs, obviously.
And the
Right.
people that they're going to complain to are the town employees, they're not going to, even if we state that it's the responsibility of the applicant to do all these things, the applicant isn't going to be around when they see it. It's going to, they're going to be in Middlebury or wherever they're doing another project, and they're going to come and talk to the town clerk and the planning department, who is then going to have to do something. So, it's a little problematic there, but
Well, I wonder if we should require signage.
I think it's required in here, actually. A signage under 6.15.8.2, application requirements, a signage and maintenance plan for the public parking spaces shall be provided.
Brilliant.
So,
It's a shall.
and the plan shall be approved by the highway department.
And ultimately the DRB.
Right. Should we
Yeah.
put it in there, Keith? I mean, or,
Well, it's given, it's installed in the RZR, so in Richmond zoning regulations. So, I mean, it would be required that the DRB does that by
Okay.
default. But to your point, clarification is, seems to be the buzzword these days.
okay. Okay, so what do you all, the rest of you, think about limiting the time for the parking? And also, I mean, doesn't really matter for the accessible adaptable units, because that's just a one-off thing. They have to make them accessible to begin with. And that we look at them when we give the CO, these checklists has all been, and that's it, that's done. There's no future monitoring of that. The affordable housing, if it's in perpetuity, does have these problems of, somebody has to watch it. It has to be written down in a way that people can remember to do that. And so that and public parking. Any thoughts on that?
15 years for both. If that's where the state's going with their stipulations, you know, matching that seems very reasonable from both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I could go there.
I could agree with that. I think that, you know, I mean, there's differences between different policies in different contexts, but in the one that we're talking about, if in 15 years, some of this zoning is successful and popular, there's nothing to prevent it from being renewed by the Planning Commission and Select Board at that time. But I think, you know, trying to be out of sync with state requirements at this point just doesn't make sense.
Okay. So we would change that wherever it's mentioned to 15 years rather than in perpetuity. Okay, any other comments about this? Does anyone have any further information that they would like to suggest we get in order to make it possible to vote to have a public hearing on this? Okay, so if we make that change and bring this document back, you all are ready to vote for it?
This would be sutured with the JC document also? Is
I'm
that
sorry,
right with it?
which
Would
document?
it be what?
Would it be sutured with the JC document, the Jolina Court? Because this is not
Oh.
associated with Jolina Court.
I don't think it, we haven't talked yet about Jolina Court, but this document, we would like, you know, we might on the same public hearing have the two documents to look at, right?
Mhm.
But we
That's
want to
what I'm
try to not say that this is sutured to Jolina Court.
No, I meant sutured in the sense that it would be on the same date.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the Jolina Court document and then,
Obviously, it's sutured to Jolina Court, but we can't say that.
right.
So,
We're trying to make it a little less sutured. So, and the other document, 6.16, do you have, can you bring that up? I don't know if
I
it's in
can bring whatever you want up.
it or not. So
mine.
6.16 is, we also need,
Oh, wait, that's not on this document. Hang on a second.
no, it's not in this document. I don't know if I put it in the packet. I think I had it in last time, but that is just the statutory language that is required. In fact, if someone were to come with an application to the Richmond zoning administrator right now to do that, even though it's not in our zoning, it would be legal for them to do that because it's in statute since last July. So we're just making it clear to people that this is in the statute. And there's really nothing to comment except the time frame. We also have to agree that we're going to have 15 years there. They say that 15 years is a minimal. So we could have more. We could put in perpetuity, but if we're not putting in perpetuity for the other things, there's no reason for us to put in perpetuity for this one.
I'd have to dig 616 out. I'm not sure where it
Okay,
is.
well, never mind, but we will be bringing that, you know, that will be a document in the packet that is the documents that we're going to approve for public hearing. Okay, so,
Now I want to find it.
All
But
right.
go ahead, please.
let's go on to our next agenda item. I think we're good. I think we've got something that we can put out in front of the public to hear what they have to say. Chris, to your point, we could work a little bit at some point on how we want to present it. And, you know, if we want to divide up pieces for the different commissioners to talk about, we could do that. We could have each one of us make a point about something. So let's think a little bit about that, how we want to present it for public hearing. This is not going to be anytime soon, so we have some time to work on it. Because we only have one meeting this month, that's this meeting. We have one meeting in January, that's the FHOD public hearing. So, you know, it's going to be February. So we will have a little time to talk and divide up maybe the responsibility of presenting it. Mark?
We're only having one meeting in January too?
Yep.
Yeah, because January 1st is our,
last meeting, huh?
See what happens when you don't show up, Mark?
That's exactly what happened.
January 1st is New
I
Year's
just
Day.
missed it, so I get it, but
Yeah.
wow. So not until 2 meetings. This one, January, beginning of the month, and then nothing until February.
Well, January 15th, it'll be the middle of the month, because January 1st, nobody wants to meet on the 1st of January, New Year's Day. So our next regular meeting is the 15th.
Okay.
Unless people want to squeeze another meeting in
Well, maybe we can
later in
address that,
January.
like on the 29th, to keep the 2-week thing going. But just because there's still the I don't know what sort of timeline or feedback you guys have talked about with the 3 parks, but I'm sure they're obviously looking to get some definition to their abilities.
Yeah, so the public hearing is on the 15th. I would be open to having a meeting on the 29th if people wanted to, but
And you're turning
Wait
around
till the
next
15th
week and
to
having
find
another
out.
meeting.
we only have, yeah, so we would have 2 weeks from the 15th to the 29th. So we could use that to digest the FHOD information that we get at the public hearing. But then the 29th to our next meeting, our first February meeting, is 1 week, which is very hard to,
That's it. Right. It's something to talk about, see how things
Sure.
are. Since we're gonna have meet so infrequently, I think the January meeting on the 15th will be our opportunity to assess where we're at. Maybe a little bit get past the holidays and all that craziness, and
yeah, I mean, in February, we'll get back to the 2 meetings. The Planning Commission, the Regional Planning Commission, CCRPC, has said they wanted to come for the initial assessment for the town plan update in 2026. They wanted to come in January. Well, we're not going to have time for them in January. They're going to have to come in February. Also, to talk to us about the NDA deficiencies that we might have. They're going to need to come and talk to us then. So anyway, by February, we would be back to a normal kind of schedule.
play it by ear. That's all good.
So, okay. The other document that we have in front of us today for our next agenda item is the Jolina Court document itself. Not that many changes. There are 2 sections of the Richmond zoning regulations that are involved. One is the Jolina Court district itself, which is section 3.9, and the other is the PUD section 512, which is where the commercial requirement for the first floor lives. That requirement is only in the PUD section. It is not in the Jolina Court zoning district itself. In the PUD section, it says, in the Jolina Court district, the first floor must be commercial. So we have agreed all that we want to get rid of that requirement and allow it to be residential on the first floor. So that will have to be a change that we'll make in the PUD section. Very easy change to make. One thing that has come up in conversations is, what about building 1, which is empty?
I'm gonna
Do we
share.
want to hold on to the commercial requirement for building one? Or one option would be to only require the first, let's say, quarter of that building that is actually fronting on Bridge Street to be commercial, which would allow them to put some additional units in the remaining 3/4 of building one. Now, building one has already been approved. That's in an approval. There would need to be an amendment. They would have to make an amendment to their master plan. We would have to allow them to put some more housing in. But this is a way to have more housing. Can we, do we want to require them to hold on to this empty space that is, they can't seem to rent in their business plan or a lease? Or would we like only for the one unit with the windows right on Bridge Street to remain commercial, and would we like to allow them to put some residential units in the rest? Anybody want to have a comment on that?
Yeah, so the reality is that they have rented that space. It's empty now, but we don't know how long it will remain empty. It's empty at least partially as a function of what they happen to be asking for it, and I don't know what that is. But that's part of the strategy of a landlord is how long are you willing to have a property be empty in order to get the rent that you're asking for? And I don't have a lot of experience with that, so I don't know what their strategy is. That said, I think there's a case to be made that they might have better luck with it as rental housing. And one of the things that I'd be willing to discuss is allowing that conversion under the terms that we discussed for increased density. So in other words, by increasing the density of the housing on that site, that it be subject to the provisions that we have just been discussing, so that they could put additional residential units in building one if they make them accessible, true, affordable, or provide the parking spots.
So how would we, I'm just trying to think how we would marry that with our freestanding density bonus section. Would we increase the total maximum allowed density? That would be a question. If we're going to,
What are we at that again? What's that number? It's 45, but then it's also, you think you'd get 20% more?
well, in the document that we have in front of us, we have 24, but what we determined last time was the density maximum that we wanted was 20, which is going to give them an additional 15 units for their whole project. So they have 14 in building one, they have 31 in building two. This would give them 15, which we assume they would put in building two. If they, got them through the density bonus program, they would have an additional 15 units. They could, if we allowed them to put them in building one, they could put some in building one and some in building two. That would be one thing that might happen. If we wanted to think, that where that number 15 came from is that's what they put in their application for the rental revolving loan fund was 15 units, even though they said they really wanted
20
more
units
units than that. But
20 units an acre when you say that, right?
yeah, 20
Okay.
units per acre
Now
is
it's
the total
15 units an
maximum.
acre for Rebecca's benefit.
Yep, up from
15.
15 units per acre. They have 3 acres, so they would go from a total of 45 for the whole project, buildings 1 and 2, to 60 for buildings 1 and 2.
I'm kind of, I was always sort of planning, okay, building 3, it's going to be tough to put commercial requirements back on that and rezone that. I don't know, maybe it isn't, since if they're ever going to put in a building 3, they're going to need an even more increased density, in which case we could require.
Yeah,
I kind of, and I was right on board with Chris's point about road frontage and building 1 and all that. But I'm a little hesitant about giving that up just because. Is it? But I don't know the industry. I don't know what they're charging. I don't have an idea. But they've managed to make it so far. I'd like to think that they could. Plus, they'll also have a potential considerable income stream with an additional 41 units, something like that. Is my math right? I don't know. 35 units. So
you mean in building 2?
yeah,
They would be
So-
going from 31 to, with 15, 46. Yeah.
yes.
So what are you saying here? Sorry, I missed your point.
Not even sure what I'm saying. So of course you
Okay.
can't stand, but I am tending to lean towards maintaining the first floor commercial for buildings fronting main roads in all districts and not exempting this one.
So maintaining the whole first floor of building 1, just like it is as commercial, is what you would favor.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. I might be turned on it if the rest of the committee is against it, but I think that's feasible to try and maintain some commercial space in the village.
Ian, I think you had your hand up next.
Okay. From what I recollect, I thought we had arrived at letting that space go to residential. Maybe I'm wrong,
On
but
building 1,
yeah.
I think this is the first time hearing of it.
Oh, okay, we hadn't talked about that before?
Yeah, no,
Talked
it was
about
just,
it, but we haven't made a decision.
Okay, I mean, I didn't mean like final decision, but I thought we had some consensus around that, but I guess it was just for building 2.
yeah, it's just for building 2, and we were kind of thinking building 1 is kind of over and done, and it's got what it's got, and so
I'd love to know what Adam or Rebecca are thinking on
Yeah.
this.
I'd like to say that I'd be okay with that being residential, but it wouldn't. I could go either way on that personally, but just in taking into consideration all of this talk about more housing, I think that we should try to maximize what's available on that spot for residential. So, but
okay.
I wouldn't, it wouldn't keep me from voting against other people on that subject, so. Anyway.
Okay, and yeah, like I mentioned, we got a letter in the last hour or 2 hours from Eric Thomas, who also said we should just do what's best for Richmond is to maximize the housing. But anyway, Chris, you're next up here.
Yeah, I realize I don't know how many commercial units are on the first floor. We know there's the street fronting one, but are there additional commercial units on the first floor?
I think there's
Well,
3.
Yeah, and for a while, Green Sea just rented them all during the pandemic.
Oh, okay.
So, and they're gone, they're long gone. They don't want them anymore. They use them kind of like storage closets for what I could see looking in the window. And I don't know if you're going to have another opportunity like that.
Well, there was that bike gear manufacturer. There was the financial advisor. There've been.
Yeah, they don't seem to be able to make it work.
Mhm.
for any length of time.
I mean, it does seem a shame to lose a storefront on the street. I'm
Yeah.
less interested in keeping the ones that don't have street frontage as commercial properties, but yeah, you give that up and it's it will have an impact on the commercial environment on the street. And I'm struggling with that. I mean, as I said, I think I could relatively easily agree to converting the back two units, taking into account the density bonus conditions that I explained before. But that street front unit, once it's gone, it's gone. It's never going back to commercial.
Yeah, I mean, I'd really like to see them make that into a more visible unit from the street front.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to see what's in there, and you have to get in, you have to walk all the way down the ramp and then go back up. It really needs steps and a visible presence on the street. I don't know if we could put that in, but
Well, we
Rebecca.
can't.
Oh, go ahead.
I mean, we can't fix all of their problems for them. It probably takes the right tenant, frankly, and it takes different business climate.
Yeah, and we have other empty space for commercial in Richmond in other buildings, so I don't know how enthused people are about bringing their businesses out here. Okay, Rebecca and then Adam.
I want to comment on is, as I've learned about Richmond over the past several months since moving here, it's really struck me how much it's grown as a community. And part of that growth is because of the vibrancy of the downtown. I can tell you that after living in Underhill for a year as I rented, as my house was being built, I was going crazy. And so, I mean, you took someone who'd never lived in a rural area and put them in Underhill for a year, and it's enough to make you go mad. So I think, anecdotally, as a newbie here, I would support, I mean, I'm thinking about a lot of things, but just continuing to add to the vibrancy of that community being one, which would be an argument for keeping that first floor commercial. But also, I'm wondering if there are any ratios that are kind of standardized around you increase a population density by X amount, and you also need to increase commercial service availability by X amount. Like, have we thought about that? Have we compared it to other towns? Because I think that kind of data would help us understand, is commercial space kind of a required because we're going to be increasing the density of an area? Just a thought.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we could ask Keith about that. I don't know where he is here. If he knows if those. Oh.
Hello.
Hello.
No, I don't know of any increase program at this point. And, I come from an urban planning environment also, and I have not seen that. Now, I haven't been in a city environment. It's more Queensbury of New York and Saratoga Springs, but they don't typically do that. But a lot of mixed use, obviously you're familiar with, would require that. And that was what they were trying to do with this district here. I just have to say that the commercial environment is just horrific right now. And it's not to say that it's not going to come back. I mean, we hope it does. I hope it will. And it doesn't mean that we're precluding them to allow them commercial on the first floor of either of the buildings at this point. It's just right now it's a restriction. And we've agreed to lift it off of building 2. And now we're discussing the building 1, aspect of that whole thing. But short and I would try not to be too circuitous here, is no, I'm not aware of any of those type of schemes, Rebecca, to be honest with you. Certainly not in Vermont. In a town this size. So,
Okay.
Okay, Adam, I think you were next up.
Yeah, I guess I was just continuing with what Rebecca said. I think if we look at surrounding communities, well, pretty being in a roundabout way involved in development and commercial development. We know the market's kind of saturated in certain capacities, but the actual small business storefront market isn't. I think that market in small towns is not reflected by the larger commercial saturation that we see with office buildings and et cetera that can be shuffled around more easily. And so, and then obviously the demand for those businesses grows in conjunction with growths in housing and housing density more specifically. I think a good example of that, while we don't want to go there necessarily, it's a tough comparison, is the recent development in Williston, where they, Finney Crossing is huge, and it's not the scale we're talking about, but the housing went in, and as the housing went in, demand for smaller storefront style businesses grew, and the Route 2 block was recently developed at the end of that. So it's a bunch of, I don't think they're the small businesses that we necessarily view as being in Richmond, but I think the same types of services could be provided in Richmond, and demand for them would grow in concert with housing. So, like to Chris's point, giving up that front spot there, and then getting rid of all housing commercial requirements as we add housing, kind of seems like we're sacrificing the commercial to get housing, and then there will all of a sudden be a demand for more commercial as we have more housing and walkability, people that are walkable to downtown. So I guess I'm all for housing. I think people that were working in the planning commission know that I was pretty adamantly in favor of anything that would get us more housing, but I do think that giving that up permanently is we're kind of trading one for the other, and that by doing that we might actually be creating a demand for what we're giving up. So I'm not sure how we balance all that, but
from a planning perspective, that would be a problem I'd love to have.
I also agree. I think from my perspective, I agree with that completely. So,
And we're not prohibiting commercial development. If the demand was there, then maybe they could.
I guess my one point would be that I think the market shifting to where there is a demand for commercial is a much lower threshold than having the demand shift where commercial is more profitable. So if we were to give the developer free rein to do either, it would still be more profitable to put in more housing. So it might make commercial viable soon, as housing goes in, but it won't necessarily make commercial more profitable than more housing. So I guess I would be hesitant to give up all of the commercial requirement, but I fully understand that they need to make it a business, and they need to make the finances work. And then also we need more housing. So the balance that we had, struck however many years ago was optimistic and made sense at the time. And obviously that needs to be rebalanced, but I don't think 100% withdrawing the commercial requirement is necessarily long-term the best solution, although it might get us housing short-term. So, it is tricky to balance those two things. I'm not trying to pretend that I have the answer to all that and how we balance that, but I guess that's kind of the conundrum I foresee us in 8, 10, 15 years or whatever, is that we have more residential downtown, and now we really wish we had reserved the right to force there to be some more commercial versus just hope that it's profitable enough to be put in place.
One thing that's interesting about Williston, as I notice in their latest development on Cottonwood Ave, they have 2 buildings that have stores on the first floor and residences above, which is what we were aiming for with Jolina Court. And then they have a building that is all residential to the ground floor. So I thought it would be interesting to talk to the town of Williston about how they decided that, that they were going to allow this one building to be all residential and then these other 2 to have stores, which seem to be occupied.
Yeah, the uses and the scale of that particular development seem much more transferable and applicable to Richmond than the Finney Crossing goes by.
Ian.
Just thinking about the conversation, I don't know if Williston's really a good example for Richmond. It's a commercial hub now, for one thing, with all of the major retailers they have there. So they draw tons of traffic. And they have a lot of other employers, like that's where my business is. I go out to lunch like 3 days a week, you know? So it makes sense, but like, we just don't have that here. And, I don't see it happening in Richmond. So like, I'm kind of more focused on more housing. And one of the documents you provided for the meeting tonight, I think the person referenced said the target should be 36 new units per year over the next 4 years. And I think we had 13 this year.
That's for Richmond?
Yeah.
Who
I mean,
said-
36 that's a high bar, right?
Yes.
And we're not even,
Yeah, that's a
we didn't even do
squishy.
30% of that this year. And most of those are like, you know, $500,000+ dollar houses out here where I live. That's not like apartments down in the village. So.
Yeah, I just want to point out that I've been tracking this just because you know, it interests me being in construction, and the 13 is a huge increase in the trajectory we're on. So not that it's
In Richmond, yeah.
yeah, I mean, there was years where we had no, I'm just not to say that we should be totally satisfied with that. Just that at least something, whether it's the planning commission's actions, the town's actions, or the market forces, has really accelerated it. So
yeah. But is that, but what kind of housing is that? You know, I mean,
no, I fully agree.
right?
It's not
Like, who can
necessarily
afford-
the housing
who
we're
can
talking
afford
about.
that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and those numbers, they come from regional planning, right, Keith? Those targets, because they are now
Targets, yes.
required statutorily to establish targets.
Yeah. Well, that comes from the state initially, you know, so, and then it's, you know, funneled down to the regional planning commissions, and, you know, ours is the largest in the state. So, you know, some of those numbers, initial numbers, you guys it would have been laughable. I mean, honestly, by 2050, they're, you know, supposed to have 3,000 units in Richmond. That was our share. You know, they've since done a better job of getting it down, but
Where are
you know,
these people coming from that think that kind of
yeah, well, we told them
population
about that, Mark. We said it's not going to work. So they
They're
have to have
coming
a
from having a problem with the fact that there's no housing, you know, that's where they're coming from, but it's kind of not realistic.
Yeah, it's not.
we also
So,
don't want them
especially here.
maps?
All right, so any other thoughts about how we're gonna make this decision about the first floor? It looks like Ian is good with them having most of it in housing.
I think if putting to a vote, I would be against it at this point. And I think
At this point.
I think some points were made by other people that were even better than mine, that at this point in the game, do we have to give it all away? I mean, we're giving away that building. We may well end up giving away the third building, but you know, we need
Giving away.
giving away the first floor commercial. Like that, we're not
It's not
giving
a
we're giving
giveaway
it.
though.
It is kind of because it commercial has its benefits.
It does. I know. Yeah.
So that's my, but we're good with that. I'm good with that. You know, it's just not practical for them to get even 31 units if they have to have the first floor commercial, because that may be too big a demand, that too heavy an anchor on their financial plans. But just keeping that first building that is commercial and is built to be commercial and is oriented that way. Keeping that commercial, I think that makes sense to me. I think the argument about more housing, more activity will put a demand on more commercial. Having those spaces there to build that commercial base would be good for us.
I guess one of the keywords you were saying, Mark, too, is that building one is built. you know, and that, you know, that, you know, has a lot of cachet. I mean, I would agree with that.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose presumably we could come back and change it in a few years. There's no, in our spare time, we could work on this district again. Okay, and Rebecca would like to keep it commercial. Chris, you'd be okay with the density bonus possibly? Oh, Chris, you want to speak?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of do a point of order that this is a very interesting conversation, an important point, but we don't need to decide this in order to vote on whether or not to set up a public meeting to consider the other materials, right? Is your intention that we consider this also at that public meeting, or I just want to make sure we get that done tonight if we can.
Well, we have to have documents. If we approve some documents for a public hearing, one of the documents would be what are the changes that are we going to make to the PUD section 5.12?
I'm sorry, public hearing or public outreach?
Public hearing.
The Planning Commission's public hearing,
On
which is our outreach
4.
on the Jolina Court District and the density bonus program.
So we're not going to attempt to do, I would almost recommend doing a community outreach now.
I don't understand.
Well, just honestly, we haven't had a lot of feedback from this, and we had bad timing for when these conversations came up. They were midsummer or busy school sessions. After the holidays, can we afford to wait till February and have community outreach discussion before we vote?
This has been on the agenda for months. This has been on the agenda for months. People could come if they were interested in talking about it. This is where we're going to find out how people feel about it, is at our public
I haven't seen
hearing.
anything on Front Porch Forum or anything like that discussing it. Maybe if we just put it out there and just post it to Front Porch Forum where we are right now in summation, and if Front Porch Forum explodes, well, then we know where we're at. If Front Porch Forum marches on, then we've got this pretty much locked down.
But Mark, why is that better than warning the public a hearing and doing what you just said in Front Porch Forum, you know, by way of letting people know what we're going to discuss at the public hearing, and then that's their opportunity to come in and tell us what they think.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe to Virginia's point, I've been on too long. That was just when we used to have to, and maybe it's changed, but it used to be expensive to hold public hearings. All the notifications and everything, I don't know, it's like $500 to post everything on all the public outreach. I don't know if maybe that's not the case anymore. And it's you know, public hearings are a dime a dozen. But that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, so
that's really the only reason I'm coming from with the public outreach before the hearing, because I know at the hearing we can change things anyways, which is sort of the thing. But the hearing you have to wait a long time for.
okay, but if the concern is that we have a public hearing and we get a whole lot, you know, a firestorm of public opinion that is opposed to, you know, what we've negotiated over the past months, that would definitely be something to be concerned about. I was on the select board when, you know, the first, you know, arrangement with Building 1 was set up, and had been on the planning commission, you know, more or less since leaving the select board. And we've been working on this for, I don't know, it's like over 10 years, you know, one way or another. The people who care about this are certainly aware of it. And, you know, they either are waiting for the public hearing or, you know, have changed their opinions. And it was all about the share of commercial space requirement at that point, you know. And I think we do want to hear from them, but I don't think there is some, I mean, I would be shocked if there's some untapped well of public opinion that would just, come out of nowhere and at a public hearing and cause us to reconsider the last 6 months of work.
Okay, Art, that's a fair
And it
point.
seems like we've arrived at a rational compromise, getting rid of the commercial in building 2. If we left it in building 1, maybe that would be a good place to leave it. Just not even talk about building 1. We have some more housing. We have some density bonus units, which appeals to people. So, I mean, I agree with Chris. I really don't think there's going to be a huge outpouring of outrage about any of these things.
Okay.
I mean, I think people are going to be
You're talking
concerned
me off the
and
cliff. I'm siding with you. All right, we can move forward. I don't know how much it'll cost, but
Well, we have to have a public hearing at some point.
yeah. very
So,
true.
yeah.
And the
This is
select
our
board,
one and only.
yeah, and if it, if it comes out of committee, you have another chance at it at the select board, but I do want to, a dose of reality. We've been at this since September of 23 for Jolina Court. Just to let you know, we're doing the, to Mark, and you probably don't want to hear this, but, the FHOD is going at light speed, so to speak. So, and rightfully so. So I just wanted to put a dose of reality in it.
All right.
so what's your dose of reality that we're not going to get to this till
No,
February?
that we've been at this since September of 23.
Since September of 23, right? Yep.
Oh,
In
Yeah.
earnest, and it hasn't been laser focused on it, but
And we'll make a big deal about getting the information out there for the public hearing. This is your chance. This is what we're considering. Here are the documents, so you can look at them. We'll have a summary of the documents, what they're saying. It's pretty small amount of things that they're saying.
I totally withdraw my concerns. I think you sold me. Let's
Okay,
let's
no
move forward
jumping
and
off.
get it done. Let's get it moving.
Yep. Okay, so was there anything else in this Jolina Court zoning district document that anyone wanted to say anything about, except for the maximum residential density bonus, the maximum number of total density increase, density bonus plus base density? We had at 24, but I think we decided last time to have it at 20.
that is correct.
So we need to change that to 20 units per acre is the total maximum, which limits the number of density bonus units you can get.
Right. So right now it states 24.
Right now it states 24, but
That needs to be reduced to 20.
that needs to be reduced to 20. Is there anything else anyone would like to talk about or change in this document? And then the PUD section is the other part that Keith had up on the screen,
Yeah,
which
that's right down here.
basically says it gets rid of the first floor commercial requirement in Jolina, in the PUD section. We get rid of that.
So this is not, there's no change to this then.
Well, I don't hear an overwhelming desire to change it,
For building one.
except for Ian would like
Not
to,
not overwhelming.
not overwhelming.
No.
Mark?
I was just, rather than changing it in the overall section, focusing just on Jolina Court and giving them an exemption. I do like it in here.
An exemption from what?
From first floor construction. You know, I'm not sold that we should give up on that.
Right. So it's not in this document right now. The only thing that's in this document is the change to the PUD language that says in building 2 or any building not fronting on Bridge Street, you can put residential on the first floor.
Right. And I was just thinking that would be in Jolina Court.
Right.
But we would, but if we're exempted here, then we exempt it for all
No, it's a specific call out in the PUD section.
It's just for Jolina Court. If you look at
Yeah.
the PUD section that's up on the screen, the PUD section has special requirements for lots of different districts. And if you remember, we put special requirements in for the IC district in the PUD section also. So in the PUD section, in the downtown block, you can't have any residential on the first floor. And in Jolina Court, we used to say you can't have any residential on the first floor. Now what we're saying for Jolina Court is that you can't have residential on the first floor of a building that fronts on Bridge Street. We're leaving that the way it is. And we're allowing them to have residential on the first floor of any building that doesn't front on Bridge Street. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, actually. Apologize.
Okay. So that's the small change that just takes the commercial away from building 2 or, you know, or beyond, but they're not going to build any more residential buildings without coming back for more density. So, you know, that will be some other planning commission's job.
Yep.
Okay, so we could approve this document for public hearing with the change to maximum of 20 units. And we could set a date and we could,
It's this right here.
which will be in February, maybe not the first meeting in February.
So what are we looking at? This is for a PC public hearing. So,
Backwards and thinking about like, why am I bringing about it?
It would be the
Person, Joel,
19th,
and those guys.
perhaps. We would like to hold the 2nd of February, that meeting, to further discuss, if necessary, the information we received at the public hearing on the flood hazard overlay district. So it would be probably the 2nd meeting in February
or the first in March,
or the 1st in March.
which may be prudent.
Yep. The other thing that's kind of in the boiling on the stove, if you like, is in the FHOD packet. We put in the trails definition and recreation path definition. So there's concern about those, and it may be that at the FHOD public hearing, if a lot of people want to talk about that we're going to take those away from the FHOD. They're not essential to the FHOD district. That question, it still leaves some things a little ambiguous about recreation paths, but I don't want to get into difficulties approving the FHOD changes that we struggled so hard to make kind of quickly by the fact that we're stuck on this trails question, which comes from other places. It comes from the Andrews Community Forest and the mountain biking people.
Those damn mountain biking people.
They are
Always causing trouble.
they want to talk about it a lot more. So I don't want that to hold up the FHOD. So be ready for that. Be ready for it to be severed, which I think is possible. Adam, you want to say something?
You're on mute, Adam.
Took me a second to find the button. I guess I would say I've received more phone calls and emails about that specific trail definition than any other thing that the select board has talked about or is even could be coming to the select board in the last year. So I would encourage you to just sever it now if you don't want that conversation to be, I would say at minimum dominated or most likely derailed by the inclusion of that. I also think that adding that definition is going to take a lot more thought than just putting it in there, because there was one member, or I guess not a member, a person who was interested in it from the perspective of the Andrews Community Forest. But of the 7 people who reached out, 6 of them were just homeowners who have trails at their own house, who said that this is an absolutely ridiculous definition and that they would then be required to get a permit to put a bike path in their own property. So that was the interpretation, and that was also I think Keith, you need to close the loop with Tyler then, because that's what he's been telling people, and that's what he told me today, that if this went through, that people would be required to have a permit for any path, and that if they were to move dirt to make that path, they would need an engineer and a surveyor. So I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not going to debate that, because I honestly don't know. Not that I don't want to, but you should close the loop with Tyler then and talk to him about that, because he has been telling people that. I followed up with him and he told me that too. So
This is not, this is not actually what it says, but if all that misinformation is out there, then, we need to do something differently. I mean,
I think that there's a lot of people who are concerned that their existing trails with this definition, and I guess what Tyler told me today was that people that have trails now needed permits and just didn't get them because previous zoning administrators didn't enforce them. So I disagree with him. It sounds like some other people do too, but I'm not in a position, I'm not an authority on it. But I think a lot of people are more fired up about this than a lot of other things, because it seems like a pretty drastic, from what they've heard and from what I heard today, and obviously that's not the whole story, sounds like a pretty drastic change in trajectory of regulating trails and paths in town. So I would just, the misinformation is going to derail it if you guys don't sever it.
There's a lot of misinformation about public and private property. But anyway, if there is all this misinformation out there, so we can't change right now, today, what documents have been proposed, approved for a public hearing, but we can at the beginning of the public hearing say that this is what we plan to do.
Okay, I would just, I don't know if you want us to have, sorry, is this for the select board? This is for a select board hearing too, right? So
no, this is for the planning commission's public hearing.
I would say that I would just be ready to, sounds like a lot of people were fired up, so I would just be prepared for that. I just want you to know what you're getting into.
We understand that because we have heard from these people.
Okay, great. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
And they were going to come tonight. I told them
of course
we were not going to talk about this tonight. This was focused on something completely different.
At least they listened.
They should come to the public hearing and they should submit whatever they wanted to in terms of comments, and that there was a possibility that we would sever those definitions and take them up later.
Is there any way you can make a public post just clarifying what the actual implications of it would be on public versus private property and all that? Because I think that's the majority of what people were fired up about. But I don't know. I don't know the nuance of how that works.
That's the select board should do that, I think.
Well, I think it's probably gonna have to come out of my office, and I'm a little concerned that my office is sending out misinformation.
Yeah, that's what I had my hand up about.
Tomorrow, so, and he's probably listening right now anyway. So, we'll discuss it.
We need
we'll get that.
We need to think about how this has all come about and what is actually being said about it. So anyway, and Adam, I don't know if there's a simple way to explain the situation that people are going to understand.
That makes sense. It's probably why we're in this position in the first place.
Yeah,
I imagine.
It's not a simple explanation. So anyway.
Well, anyway, I appreciate that you guys are working on it. I'm not trying to derail it.
I mean, what we could do is we could put out there that it's possible at this public hearing about the flood hazard overlay district that we're going to defer discussion of these trails, even though it's on the agenda that we approved. So we can do that. We might be able to do that. We'll have to think about that a little bit.
I'd like to make a strong commitment to anybody who's listening or is going to watch this video that we will talk about the trails at some point. Because I think we should, and it's in our purview to do it.
It's definitely needs to have some parameters.
Yep.
Because, there are no definitions in our ordinance about it, and it is of concern to many people. So
Yeah.
we need to have this discussion, and it can be a public discussion that involves all the different factors and factions. But I'm not sure that we should do it in conjunction. It's only tangentially related to the flood hazard overlay district material.
Yeah.
It is tangentially related, but it's not essential that we deal with it at the moment. We can carry on the way we've been carrying on, which is controversially, but we can continue that until we have this discussion.
I would think that if we don't remove it, it's gonna slow things down for the FHOD. And we're, and like I said before, we're at light speed at this, and this would really slow it down. So that's all I have to say about that.
Yep. So anyway, so Keith, I think that you and I should talk about the best way to do that, to
Yep.
indicate to people that it is possible, so that they don't all come and take up time at the FHOD hearing, because I would really like the people to come who have concerns about the flood hazard overlay district itself to be able to speak about it at this public hearing, and that we get the outreach that we need in order to decide how we're going to, which document we're going to send on to the select board.
That's fine, absolutely.
So-
What do we want to do with our amendments though right now? Time's running out.
Yep. Okay, so we can either vote to approve the Jolina Court District 3.9 changes and the 5.12 changes for public hearing on the 1st of March. And then add, after we approve it at our next meeting, which is not till January, the density bonus documents, unless we want to try to make sure that we have exactly what we want right now. The only changes are changing the in perpetuity wherever it exists to 15 years. It's really the only change that we have.
Yeah, it didn't seem like there was that much as,
So we could approve that if we wished.
Excuse me, would we have time to look at the finished document on the 15th?
Oh,
Well,
you mean yeah, it'll be forwarded to you. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I mean,
the density bonus sections.
we could put all of these finished documents on the 15th and
And
maybe vote.
if we approved them on the 15th, what would be the earliest we could have a hearing?
Probably the 19th of February.
That's pretty good.
I thought we were talking about doing it in March anyway.
Yeah.
Or the first meeting in March.
We're talking Jolina Court.
We're
But if we-
talking Jolina Court and density bonus. Yeah,
I was just thinking if we wait till the first meeting in February to discuss these revisions, which sound pretty clear cut, but I would like to just sort of see a complete red line and a complete clean line on both of those. If we could have those for the 15th of January, then we can just quickly vote on January 15th, hold a hearing on, what'd you say, the 19th of February? The second meeting in February?
that would be the earliest, and that's assuming that we don't have a lot of work coming out of the FHOD public hearing.
True, but I mean, I think for these two districts, we're pretty close, right? I mean,
Yeah, we don't have a
Not that
lot of
many
work
more
we have to do on these two districts.
right. So if it won't take us long, I think. I think we all have an idea of where it is.
Yeah.
I know I do, and I've missed meetings. So I would say that we do that, and then we vote on the 15th to have it in February and get that one moving too.
Yeah, if we vote to have it on the second meeting in February, that leaves one meeting for us to fix the FHOD coming out of the public hearing in January. Is that okay with you? I mean, I think it's okay because I don't think we're gonna have, the Three Parks Committee is good with it. They
Yep.
have no issues with the changes, so, you know, I'd probably be okay with that. I don't know, Keith, what do you think? Would you think we should wait till the first of meeting in March, or?
I like to put a hedge in because of the workload that we're under. But I mean, we're so far along with this. Yeah, it's real. I honestly, it's up to you folks. I mean, please. I mean, we've been working out this diligently.
Is it
Specifically,
reasonable to have a final markup, final red line and a final clean copy before the meeting on the 15th and still get ready for the hearing?
Yeah,
Oh, I don't see why
If
not.
that's possible, then
We might be able to get that to you
if
before
it gets-
Christmas.
If it gets messy on the 15th, first thing we do is punt. Right? If that's what it is. But I think it's going to be really clean. We'll be able to just say boom, boom. And if
what do you mean we punt, Mark? What do you mean we punt?
back to March or April, you know what I mean? And have more discussion on it. But I think we're all going to come in and read it before the 15th and spend 5 minutes agreeing that this is the final version. I'm optimistic of that anyways, because we have already invested and spent so much time on it.
And
So-
I guess we won't have put out all the notifications and stuff. I'm just thinking of the
Till that
timing.
time, if on the 15th we vote to go to hearing on the 15th, then we have a month to get the notifications out and everything, right? And still make late February. Which, you know, at this point, I'm sure some folks would like
Yeah,
to know sooner rather than later. I mean, we're so close.
That's-
Okay, so what I'll put on the agenda for the 15th is the public hearing on the FHOD. And then we'll have a 5-minute item, which is to approve for public hearing and set the date at that time, Jolina Court District and the density bonus program.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
So I think we can do that because we
Hear,
won't
hear.
have any of the preparation for the public hearing before then anyway. So if we feel we get a lot of comments and we're going to need more than one meeting to straighten them out. Is that okay, Keith? Scheduling wise?
Sure.
I mean, because there are all these things about the town plan that we need to get on with. And the amazing thing is, this year is going to go so quickly that we're not even going to know what hit us.
Yeah,
It's going to be intense.
What?
It was brutal the last time around.
Yeah. I remember the last time around. But we're
Oh.
hoping we don't need a lot of changes this time. So anyway, we do have statutory things that we have to put in, you know, all the Act 181, Act 47, the Act 59, the forest blocks.
In deference to the lateness of the hour,
Yes.
Oh, excuse me.
I would like to move that we adjourn.
I'm sorry.
Is there a second?
A second that.
Ian seconds it. Yeah, and the dates that are under updates and other business, those are just a reminder of the dates that are coming up. So you can read those on your own. Adam wants to say something.
Oh yeah, quick, before you guys adjourn, I just want to say, I know the Jolina Court in particular has been beat to death. And I was reading the documents today before this meeting and just really thankful that you guys have put on the hard work on this. It's coming together nice and it seems like an excellent compromise from everyone's perspective that I've heard from on this committee and just great work. That's it.
Thank you.
Okay, could you convey that to the other members of the select board? That would be really good. Use your
I will do that as well.
powers, your superpowers.
I don't know if I have
to
any
convince
powers, but
the
I'll just
select board. So,
tell them.
yep, thank you, Adam. All right, so we have a
Amen.
motion. It's been made and seconded. Any more discussion about this motion?
Aye.
Okay, all in favor of adjourning can raise their hand or say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Good night, all.
All
Good
right,
night.
good
Thank you.
night. we'll,
Virginia,
have
Virginia could just stick around for a second.
okay, have a good holiday, everybody. Good holidays,
Right.
and the new year will,
Take care.
yep.
Yep.
Good night. Bye. Bye, Aaron.